Who am I? I'm a Welshman living in northern Sweden. I was on my way to Alaska and I kind of stopped halfway.
By chunks out of me, you're a shark and I'm swimming. My heart still thumps as I bleed, and all your friends come sniffing. Triangles are my favorite shape. 3 points where 2 lines meet. Toe to toe, back to back, let's go, my love. It's very late till morning come. Let's desolate.
The reason why I chose northern Jämtland is because it's pretty much on the same latitude. The environment is very much the same, the weather's the same. But I work with sled dogs, so I've been working with dogs all my life. For the last 15 years I've been working with sled dogs and running tours for tourists really. So I'm a tourist musher. I also, I'm a forest worker, I work in the forest. And I'm also very interested, in indigenous cultures, and a lot of Stone Age knowledge, the things that we don't use anymore. I'm very interested in nature and its resources. And I also make a lot of clothing from caribou or reindeer, and I sell the clothing all around the world pretty much. Well, Jämtland is a big commune, or len rather. It's very remote. There's very few people here. There's a vast amount of nature here. I mean, Sweden is 78% covered in forest, and with only 10 million people living in Sweden, if you think about it, there's only 10 million living in London. So 10 million living in Sweden, this particular area is vastly unpopulated. And it's hardcore nature here, it really is. I mean, it's very much like Scotland or the Glencoe area, but the temperatures are different and the fauna is different. You've got the boreal forest here, and there's only like 12 species of trees here, whereas you go over to the border in Norway, there's a big increase in the amount of trees. But here we high up, this area of Ucha or Utwa, depending on how you pronounce it, depending where you're from, is remote. But there's quite a lot of tourism here, which is great because even though we live in this wild area, you have to make a living. So this is a nice tourist area, not too much, but just right. Which, as I said, Ucha backs on to a huge nature reserve. In fact, we've got a few nature reserves around here. We got bear, we got lynx, we got moose, reindeer, wolverine, wolf. So you can just kind of imagine the area that you're in. It's not a playground either. I mean, you have to have a little bit of knowledge living here, especially doing the job that I do. You have to have a little bit of nature knowledge to live here, because the nature can turn on you here. It can bite, it can kill you. I mean, there are deaths here in this area. I mean, it can turn on you if if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time. So yeah, I mean, it is real wilderness here for sure. Okay, so now the Kudluk is lit. You won't believe how well the moose scat, the hare scat, the dry rock moss works. It works perfectly. And the heat of this now is, I can really feel the heat. And the soapstone now is already starting to warm up. So when this is at its full bore, this will be kicking off a little bit of heat. And for something like some little small place like this, you could definitely raise the temperature. born in the wrong country, I felt. There was always something missing. It was never wild enough for me, you know, Wales, even though it's a beautiful place. But I mean, as I said, I just felt as if there was something missing. So ever since I was a small child, I was always very interested in the nature, what I could do with these trees, you know. I looked at the nature as shapes and colours. It was something artistically drawn. I was artistically drawn to the nature in a different way. And I'm 50 now, and you know, when I look back at my childhood to who I am now, you know, I see connections with the way I was as a kid and who I am now, you know, with making things, artistic things from the nature, and I'm being very, very immersed in that. So yeah, I see nature in a different way. So this is a pile of sinew taken from the moose, which I've hung up on the wall, and it's dried now. So they can be kept for years and years and years as a resource ready to be pounded into string. I always was very interested in how these cultures were able to live off the land and successfully live off the land. And I lived off grid myself for 5 years, living from the nature in a log cabin, no water or electric, living really off the land. And I could see that you need quite a lot of knowledge to be able to function, you know. And I had, you know, a chainsaw, I had a snow machine, I had a quad, you know. But these people from years ago, you know, they didn't have any of this. And so how did they function? So I started to research, and I started to really get involved. I've always been involved and interested in it, but not focusing on certain things. So as a child, I was always, you know, hunting with hawks. I was a falconer back in the UK, so that's somebody who works with birds of prey. So I was a prolific hunter in the UK. But you know, the things that I was catching, I felt as if very conscious of waste. So I wanted to use everything that I was catching. So I started experimenting with tanning hides, making gloves from rabbit skins, you know, making needles from ribs, using the sinews for sewing. Of course, it just took me on a journey then, you know, to where I am now. So yeah, that's the story in a nutshell. Yeah, when I lived off grid, I mean, the toughest thing that I found living off grid, I mean, it definitely was the cold. I mean, here in Jämtland it can drop to -30, but there's no water. We didn't have any water, we didn't have any electric. So staying warm, you know, it was the biggest issue, especially having my wife living there. You know, she was felt the cold much more than me, so that was the biggest issue. But we overcame that with certain things, like using a soapstone telestain, you know, a roundhouse stove, which increased the heat, using different type of woods and that type of thing. But yeah, that was the biggest issue, was the cold, living off grid in northern Scandinavia. 5 years, we've lived for 5 years with no water or electric. We were living like Charles Dickens. I mean, we had candles in the house. We were using head torches in the winter time, and we were sourcing our own water. You know, we were drinking water from the rivers. We were storing blocks of ice. You know, it was tough. I remember living, you know, at that cabin and enjoying the lighting of the fires. I'd get up 7 o'clock in the morning, light the main fire in the main lounge or room, and then I would go into the kitchen then to get, you know, the Queen's coffee and breakfast ready. So I would get up and I would cut my wood, and I would feed, you know, this, don't forget now, I pictured it now, silent snow falling outside, pitch black, darkness in the morning. So I feed this little tiny fire about 4 inches by 4 inches square little hole to feed. And I close the door of this little fireplace and I see the light flickering, the firelight flickering on the wall behind me in the darkness of the morning light. And I used to sit there and I used to enjoy, you know, that light, that morning, that moment of the smell and the fire on the wall behind me. I just enjoy that. And it took, even though it took an hour to light this, to get the kettle boiled. Now Claire one day, she turned up with a gas bottle and a gas stove. Boy, was I irritated, to say the least. I was kind of almost bordering on anger and betrayal. And I said to her, now, you know, why would you possibly want a gas fire and a gas stove? And she just said, quick cup of coffee in the morning.
I just wanted a 10-minute coffee, not an hour.
I don't want to wait for an hour, but I said this, you know, but it's, you know, why? So anyway, I, you know, inevitably
gave in
and, you know, maybe was irritated that I couldn't light the fire so quick, and I kind of just lit the gas.
You got into it, didn't you, very quickly?
To get the kettle going, and yeah, it did. It took 3-4 minutes to light to get the kettle going. And then one day, I was irritated because the gas had run out. But I learned a lot. You know, it was interesting for me. I was very close to the nature. I was noticing the first plants that grew first and the last ones that died. It even affected my senses, where we lived in a cabin which was quite near a hiking trail to one of the biggest mountains in this area. But what was interesting, I could actually smell people coming. So I could, while I'm working in the forest, I could get something on the air, like smelling Calvin Klein, you know, on the air. But that's how in tune my senses was, that I could actually smell people coming from, say, you know, 200 yards, 200 meters away. I could smell them coming. So that's how it changed my sensory perceptions. But not only affected my sensory perceptions, it also taught me things like being happy with much less. For example, my relationship with my wife was great. You know, we talked a lot more, we ate together, we didn't have a TV, we didn't have any internet, we didn't have these distractions. So it brought us very close together as a team, you know. I never left the forest. I was up in the nature. I could be up in the nature there, up in these mountains of northern Jämtland for almost 6 or 7 months, not coming down into the valley, you know, and associating people. It detoxed my mind, detoxed me as a person. And it's a very interesting journey, realizing that you can live very happily with much less. So that's how it affected me. What wild animals do we have here?
Bear.
You have the bear. What else do you have? You can see it in Swedish if you want. I'll translate for you. So what other animals do you have?
Moose.
Moose. What are the ones, Lola?
Reindeer.
Reindeer. So we have bear, moose, reindeer. What else? What animal did I show you in there, the bag made, the skin bag that I made?
Beaver.
Beaver. So we have beaver, moose, we have bear, reindeer. What I would say to somebody who was thinking of living off-grid, I mean, it's probably going to be the best time of your life. Because right now people have got nothing to compare their lives to. They're in the rat race. They're in going to work, being up in the morning, waiting for traffic, waiting in queues, being stressed out all the time. And you're living with a certain amount of stress. But you don't know that until you extract yourself out of it. And when you extract yourself out of it, you'll feel your levels of stress diminish. And then when you return back to that lifestyle, if you ever do, there'll be a big comparison, and it's likely to leave you with quite a void, or maybe a feeling of never wanting to return to that. It will change your life and your mindset. It will change in a completely different way. So my advice to people who are thinking of living off-grid, absolutely do it if you've got the opportunity, because it'll be the first time in your life that you will be able to live life at your own pace. And that's something that people do not do. How many people can actually say that they live life at their own pace? They don't. What the history of that is that it's quite a soothing to your skin. So the Romans would put it in their shoes.
Okay.
And when they used to go on long marches, all right, it would be a soothing to the feet. So the Latin name, Achille millefolium, meaning
that makes sense.
The Romans used to put it in their shoes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was one of the other challenges that I felt with living off-grid, was working with, 80 sled dogs, 88 dogs we had. So I was running a business, driving teams of sled dogs through the wilderness, earning money from that, because we had to sustain ourselves. But also coming back home after the day's work and having to split wood, having to go down to the river and source water. So even though when you're very tired, you're still having to do these things. Life doesn't stop in the nature. When you're living off-grid, it's 24 hours. And your level of fitness goes through the roof. I mean, it's very physical, but very rewarding in a lot of ways. Even though we didn't have a lot of money in that regard, we were rich in a different type of a way. So it was a very interesting journey, something that, we returned back to living off-grid, but as I said, with some comforts. The fact that, let's use the Inuit for example, they were making their clothing, but also decorating their clothing. They didn't just make a bone tool. These bone tools were decorated. So what that's saying is that they had time to do this. They were living in relative harmony. They were living in comfort to a certain degree, to have time to even put patterns in the clothing, to carve certain tribal emblems into their tools. That's saying that they were living in the nature, but they were living comfortably as well. So that's what I'm doing in a lot of ways, because even though I'm not living like that, I'm still living in the nature, but I'm still making clothing from caribou, still making leather from moose hides, and earning a living from it. So it's in a different way, but I'm in that environment, I'm in that mindset, living comfortably from the nature, even though some people might not view it as living comfortably, but it depends on how you view comfort and how you see it, because I find it very rewarding myself. I was not a normal child where young men would go and kick a football and play sports. I wanted to make things with skin. That was strange. Oh. Yeah, this is something else that affected me as well, living off-grid, is I understood how difficult it was. Hunters might go out hunting, but they got a gun. Yeah, they got a disadvantage. People hunt here in Scandinavia with GPS on dogs, this type of thing. For me, that's against the grain. I mean, you're losing your knowledge. If you're using modern technology to hunt, for example, you're losing the skills directly there. So even though I'm not against hunting, I'm against the way that it's been done. But something happened to me once. I mean, as I said, I was a prolific hunter. I would be hunting foxes and all this type of thing. But I remember walking home one day and seeing some guys who had some dogs, terriers and lurchers, this type of thing, and they'd killed a young fox. They'd hunted it and killed it and just thrown it away like a piece of rubbish. And it was interesting, on my way back I passed the same area and I could hear the mother fox calling in the distance. Ow, 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 ow. You know, she was calling this young cub. Now I knew that this cub, you know, was never gonna return. But it was interesting to me, the penny drop, bump, is how difficult it is for these animals bringing their offspring up into the nature and having to, you know, survive. And on top of that, having people hunting them. So this is where I feel I connected with indigenous people, because they've got respect for the nature. You know, they will use everything. The bones, the sinew, the fur, everything will be used. Whereas now, animals are shot, we're not given a thought of what they go through. And this is what I'm drawn to, is the respect for the nature, the respect for the environment, the respect for animals. You know, now we live in an environment where there's such disrespect, where, you know, things are thrown away. But indigenous people are realizing this. You know, I've just come back from Greenland running workshops with Inuit people, because they realize that the indigenous knowledge is being lost, because the caribou is being hunted out in Greenland and the skins are being thrown away, they're not being used. You know, but the same thing is happening in Sweden in a lot of ways, where the moose are hunted, but the skins are discarded, the feet are discarded, the sinews are not being used, you know. But this is such a fantastic resource. It's not being harvested, not being used, being disrespected in a way, you know. The reindeer here in Sweden is being used. I mean, it's great that the fact that the skins are not being thrown away. But however, I mean, all over the world, you know, this is what Beyond the Embers is about. It's about interviewing people and getting their take on how things have changed over the years. Has it been detrimental, you know, to society, you know, or has it been an advantage? So this is what we're going to be doing. We're going to be basically focusing on these particular aspects, you know. So yeah.
And I was like, who is that? Right? And he's going across the lake, right? And we were staying in the teepee. And I thought, I want to do that, you know? So the idea for me with sled-dogs was born.
Yeah.
Like, as far as the reindeer skin clothing or the caribou skin clothing, I mean, nothing's been handed down to me. I've had to learn all this. I mean, I've been sewing and making clothing from caribou for 30 years. But, you know, I'm only now kind of learning about it. You know, I've never been taught. Nothing's been handed down to me by my father or his father. So I've had to take the long route down. You know, I've come across opposition. I've come across indigenous people, you know, not thinking that I've copied or taken away some sort of knowledge or disrespected them in some way. But what I'm seeing is that the indigenous people are losing their knowledge as well. I mean, there's people like me who are trying to keep it alive. So yeah, nothing's been handed down to me. I've had to teach myself. There's no books on the subject, you know. So I've had to really work hard to learn all this. And as I said, I'm 30 years in, and I'm still a child at this particular subject. So it's been a very interesting journey, you know, my particular journey in the nature. Because I said, I see the nature as a living entity. There's art all around you. But I look at it in a very similar way to indigenous people, actually.
To go you say foraging,
Yeah.
like picking
Picking food.
mushrooms, picking berries and everything. We're allowed to go basically anywhere that's not close to a house and put up a tent for a night, move on to another place and so on. But we have to follow the rules that are based around common sense, really.
Yeah, nice.
No leaving traces behind and stuff.
That's cool. I really like that. Not to leave a trace behind you. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
Well, my focus is basically getting this knowledge out there. I mean, me personally, you know, running workshops in Greenland with the Inuit people has been rather inspiring for me to take that further. I mean, the knowledge, if anything happens to me, the knowledge I have dies with me. And I think that it's people like me that we want to be interviewing with Beyond the Embers, because that's pretty much the way that we can actually get that knowledge out there, or get an interest back in it, you know, to run workshops and this type of thing. So this is my focus, really, is to build up a YouTube channel, focusing on these subjects, for there to be an interest, for it to snowball, and for it to get back, for us to use these things again. What's the most rewarding part about working with sled dogs? But what I say to people when they come to work with me, yeah, or if I've got any dog handlers, I said, look, it's 90% hard work and it's only 10% fun. But the 10% it balances it all out. So the most rewarding thing for me is, you know, driving through a blizzard, you know, and I'm wearing caribou skin clothing, because in -30 it is the only thing that you can wear that you will not feel a cold. So there's something really kind of mesmerizing and about working with a team of sled dogs in some of the roughest weather, you know, but driving a team of sled dogs underneath the northern lights, or when there's blue skies, there is something magical about it. The sled dog and wilderness living go hand in hand. They fit like a glove. Like the Inuit still use the dogs to hunt. Okay, snow machines are used, but you know, for example, in Sissimut, I mean, there's 2,000 sled dogs. It's a big part of indigenous culture, the sled dog. And this is something that a lot of other bushcraft companies, you know, they haven't got sled dogs. They're not living in this environment. And one of the things that I was very inspired of when I was in Greenland, even though I'd heard about it before, but going there, it definitely inspired me to follow in Franklin's footsteps and to go where he went, to go up to the Northwest Passages and to see what he was up against. You know, maybe even finding his grave, who knows. But it was a big wow factor of the risks that they took. Now, First Nation, how they would make needles is that they would take it from the rib bone of a certain type of duck. So birds, or game birds, the capercaillie, the grouse, the pheasant, you know, these type of birds, the game birds, as well as duck and geese, the rib bones of the bird would have been used for needles. Look at the state of the world, look at the state of the planet. We're obviously doing something wrong. The internet, all this technology, is not helping, is it? You'd think with modern technology, the internet, all mankind's creations, technology, the world is becoming a better place. Should be becoming a better place now we got all this technology. But it's not, is it? We've seen a breakdown in families. We've seen a breakdown in the climate. We've seen, you know, the world is in a terrible state. You know, the biggest risk to the planet now is is not the planet, but mankind himself. You know, have we gone too far down the road? You know, I've often asked myself the question, you know, if we were to stop this, you know, we'd have to go back to horse and cart. Nobody's going to be going back to horse and cart. People have got problem going from the iPhone 7 to the iPhone 4. I mean, I don't even know what iPhone is out there now. Is iPhone 11 or 12? No idea. But for people to go backwards, it's not going to happen. So something has to change. But using the power of the internet, basically to get this information out, hopefully it will inspire people, you know, to follow in my footsteps and to make it a journey and to open the book. That's what's not happening. The book is closed. The book is shut. We need to open it and start reading the pages. And one of these pages that you're going to get to has got the heading Beyond the Embers on it. So hopefully people will read it and be inspired to take it further.
Trolls, I hear, is a subject that could be interesting to talk about.
Trolls, oh yeah, they are definitely around. There's things that go missing if you put things down. No, I mean, it's another interesting thing, you know, with indigenous cultures is that they wouldn't have had any TV. They wouldn't have had these things that we have for entertainment, for example. There would have been a lot of storytelling, you know, around the campfire. And you can see how these things, you know, have basically, you know, these, what's the word I'm looking for? These fantasies or these, this storytelling business has taken hold. You can imagine people in a teepee or a sami gotti, or in an igloo, you know, in Greenland, you know, talking about the hunt, talking about what happened. You know, there's going to be things where they've elaborated on it, and something happened or some sort of shadow, and they thought that some sort of spirit was following them, and they made a story out of it, you know. But all through, you know, all through the ages, all through these indigenous cultures, there's a harmonious theme in a lot of these tribal people. They've all have got the same type of spiritual look at, you know, at the environment. For example, you've got fungus. You know how one day there would be nothing there, and all of a sudden they appear. You know, there's got to be some sort of spiritual thing around these funguses. You know, obviously, you know, look at fly agaric. You know, they would have eaten them. Or look at psilocybin or magic mushrooms. You know, they would have used these things to go into the spirit world. I mean, to open their mind. I mean, and these things, these trolls or these type of things, I think that's how it's become. They were born. The story is told to the children. The singing, the indigenous yoik, for example, in Sweden. You know, there's no television, there was no entertainment, so yeah, they would yoik about how they feel. You ask yourself, why do we walk down the street and whistle? You know, it's a feel good, you know. So a lot of these chants and a lot of these things would have originated in this way. And the storytelling. Trolls were born, something to tell the children, something to keep them away from the river, keep them away from danger. I get it. We do the same type of thing with our kids now. I mean, you know, you go outside. When I was a kid, if you go outside, my mother say, the man will get you, or the boogeyman will get you. Who's the boogeyman? Is that a troll? Maybe it is. The boogeyman is the troll equivalent in the UK. So as human beings, we do that. I could never live anywhere else. I mean, it's in my blood. It's been in my blood since I was a little kid. As I said, I'd been born in the wrong country. I should have been born Inuit or indigenous. I don't know why I got this drawn, you know. I don't know why.
with her Spanish candles and her Persian poems, stuck on the rocks inside Opus 40 stone. And scratching her wrists in the pouring rain, she collapses down upon the ocean floor. Again, tears in waves, mine's on fire. Lights alone by your side. Catskill mansions, buried dreams. I'm alive, she cried, but I don't know what it means. But somewhere out there across the moonlit sands, there's a line drawn like the lines on her own hand. And slamming her eyes, locking the door, she collapses down upon the ocean floor.
Oi!